The endless reign of Lumeris. In the faraway land of Lumeris, where the skies were once blue and the meadows shimmered with silver flowers, a rain began to fall. At first, it was nothing unusual, a gentle drizzle that tapped lightly on rooftops, danced upon the leaves, and whispered against the windows of high towers. But the rain did not stop. Days passed, then weeks, then months. The rivers overflowed their banks, the fields turned into endless marshes, and the roads became deep canals. The people of Lumeris, craftsmen and merchants, farmers and scholars, all watched as their world changed before their eyes. At first, they built bridges over the rising waters. Then, when the bridges sank, they built rafts and boats. Cities crumbled under the relentless flood, their grand spires vanishing beneath the waves. The forests became an endless swamp, where only the highest treetops peaked above the water's surface. The animals, too, fled the rising tide. Great wolves and tiny rabbits, wise old owls and delicate foxes, people made space for them on their boats, building floating sanctuaries. And so, the land of Lumeris became a kingdom of ships, drifting upon an endless sea. But no matter how many vessels they built, no matter how far they sailed, there was no shore in sight. The land of Lumeris was gone. Swallowed by the water. Cat Sea and the ship of wanderers. Among the many sailors who now lived upon the great sea, there was a girl named Cat Sea. Young and full of quiet determination, she had built her own ship with her own hands, a sturdy vessel with bright red sails, carved railings, and a figurehead shaped like a leaping fox. Her ship was unlike any other, for it carried not just people but creatures of all kinds. 3 sleek cats curled up in the sun on the deck. A blue-scaled salamander rested in a little glass dome of warm stones. A woolly sheep grazed on a patch of grass Cat Sea kept in a wooden planter. 3 sinuous snakes coiled around the mast. And above them all, a flock of sparrows flitted in and out of the rigging, their tiny wings beating against the salt-heavy air. Though the cities of Lumeris were gone, the magic of the land had not entirely disappeared. Cat Sea's hold was filled with food that never ran out, enchanted grain, endless barrels of dried fruit, honeycombs that never lost their golden sweetness. But even with a full ship and good company, she longed for land. For solid ground beneath her feet, for the scent of flowers and the warmth of an unmoving sun. There was a legend among the sailors. A tale passed from ship to ship, whispered between captains under the dim glow of lanterns. A floating island. A place where the rain never fell too hard, where the land never drowned, no matter how strong the tide. Cat Sea did not know if it was real, but she had to find it. The map of tides. One evening, as the sun dipped below the endless sea, another vessel came alongside Cat Sea's ship. Its captain was a tall, weathered man with a coat made of stitched-together sails and a hat adorned with seashells. He called himself Captain Aldrin, and he had seen many strange things upon the drowned world. They shared stories, traded news. And then, after much conversation, Aldrin reached into his coat and pulled out something wrapped in oilskin. An ancient map. Its edges were frayed, its ink faded, but Cat Sea could see the lines of currents, the paths of the sea. And there, marked with a single golden symbol, was an island. It moves, Aldrin said, tapping the map. It never stays in one place. But follow this route, and you might just catch it. Cat Sea felt her heart quicken. She had to have it. Aldrin laughed when she offered him gold. A useless thing, money, in a world without markets, he mused. But I suppose old habits die hard. And so, for a handful of coins that no longer held much value, Cat Sea became the keeper of the map. She rolled it up carefully, tucking it into her coat. And with the stars above and the endless sea below, she set her course. The search for the floating island had begun. Part 2, The Voyage of the Wanderers. The red-sailed ship cut through the endless sea, moving with the steady rhythm of waves. The sun rose and fell, the stars traced their silent arcs across the heavens, and Catsi and her companions drifted deeper into the unknown. On board, life followed its own strange rhythm. Kaiko, Coco, and Kari, the three cats, spent their days lounging on the sun-warmed deck, their tails flicking in time with the ship's swaying. Ilurian, the salamander, liked to curl up inside his heated glass dome, basking in the warmth of enchanted stones. The three snakes, Nivis, Vetra, and Umbra, slithered through the ropes and masts, watching the water with cold, thoughtful eyes. Moss, the sheep, was perhaps the strangest of all, a patient creature who never seemed troubled by the shifting sea, content to chew on the never-ending patch of grass Catsi had planted for her. And above them all, the flock of sparrows flitted and danced, messengers of the wind. But adventure does not wait forever. One day, as the ship sailed through deep blue waters, a shadow rose from the depths. The ship that looked like a fish. It was Kaiko who saw it first. The white-furred cat had been curled on the edge of the deck, eyes half closed, tail twitching lazily. Then, suddenly, ears perked, pupils wide, a loud mrow. Coco and Kari were on their feet in an instant, tails puffing up. Catsi turned just in time to see it. A giant fish, larger than her ship, its sleek body gliding just beneath the water's surface. It was vast, impossibly vast, its shadow stretching across the waves like a moving island. And then it surfaced. It was not a fish. The curved fins were wooden beams. The scales were panels of weathered copper, green with age. The eye was a round glass window, glinting in the sun. It was a ship, built in the shape of a great fish, floating low, with only the topmost part of its roof breaking the water. But the cats did not care about any of this. Because from the belly of the strange ship, a chorus of meows rose up, dozens of them, high-pitched and insistent. Kaiko, Coco, and Kari launched themselves overboard without a second thought. Catsi screamed. She leaned over the railing, heart pounding. The cats paddled toward the fish, but before she could even think of jumping in after them, the wooden mouth of the vessel opened, and inside, more cats. A figure appeared on the deck of the fish ship. A man with wild grey hair, dressed in deep sea blue, his coat lined with fur. He lifted a hand in greeting, his own cats twining around his legs. "Ah! Visitors!" he called. "No need to panic, Captain. Your cats just heard the call of their kin." A ladder unrolled, and soon Catsi found herself standing on the strange ship's deck, watching as Kaiko, Coco, and Kari rubbed against their newfound friends. The ship's captain, Joran Tidewake, welcomed her with a laugh. "We call this one the Silver Leviathan. She sails low, almost like a fish herself. Harder for storms to overturn her that way." They spoke for hours, trading stories. The two captains exchanged supplies. Catsi gave Joran dried fruit and honey, while he shared smoked fish and fresh water from an enchanted barrel. The cats, meanwhile, explored every inch of the vessel, playing with their new companions. By evening, the ships parted ways. The Silver Leviathan slipped back beneath the waves, its hull vanishing like a real sea creature, and Catsi's ship continued its journey. But there were more adventures ahead. The three serpents and the storm. Nivis, Vetra, and Umbra were not ordinary snakes. Each bore something unusual, Nivis had pale, ice-blue scales that shimmered under the moonlight. Vetra was deep emerald, her eyes ever watchful. And Umbra was darkest black, his coils blending into the shadows. They were silent travelers, rarely seen but always present, slipping through the rigging and curling around the masts. One night, a storm struck. The sky turned ashen grey, the wind howled, and rain hammered the deck in silver sheets. The sparrows shrieked and took shelter under the sails. Moss, the sheep, huddled close to Catsi, trembling. Illyrian curled deep into his warm glass dome. But the snakes climbed. They slithered up the mast, toward the roaring sky, sensing something in the wind that even Catsi could not see. And then a lightning bolt split the heavens, but it did not strike the mast. It struck Nivis. For a moment, Catsi thought he had been burned away. But then she saw, the pale blue snake was glowing, his body humming with energy. Nivis coiled around the mast, and the storm's fury lessened. The wind obeyed him. The waves calmed. The ship steadied. The storm passed. And from that day forward, Nivis carried a flickering blue glow, as if lightning had never left his veins. Moss and the Phantom Island. Moss the sheep was a simple soul, yet she had an uncanny instinct for land. One morning, as the ship drifted through the quiet sea, Moss bleated loudly, stamping her hooves. She turned in circles, sniffing the air, her ears twitching. Catsi frowned. "What is it, girl?" Then, land. A tiny patch of green in the endless blue. It wasn't the floating island they sought, only a rocky isle, with just enough space for the ship to dock. Moss was the first to set hoof on it, bleating in satisfaction. But when Catsi followed, she saw something strange. Footprints. Human footprints. Someone had been here before. The flight of the sparrows. The flock of sparrows was restless. One morning, the birds vanished. Catsi watched them soar over the water, their tiny forms dwindling into the distance. She called for them, but they did not return. Hours passed. Then a great shape rose from the sea. A leviathan, enormous, covered in gleaming scales, its back breaking the waves. Catsi froze, gripping the wheel of her ship. But the sparrows flew above it, hundreds of them now, not just her own. They circled the beast, guiding it, leading it somewhere unseen. The leviathan did not attack. It swam, following the sparrow's path, vanishing beyond the horizon. And when the birds returned, Catsi swore they looked wiser. The search continues. The ship sailed on. With a storm-touched snake, a land-seeking sheep, a fire-hearted salamander, and birds who had flown with sea gods. And Catsi knew. They were closer to the floating island than ever before. Part 3, The Island Beyond the Sea. Catsi had almost stopped believing the island was real. The days stretched into weeks, the weeks into months, and still, the endless sea surrounded her ship on all sides. She followed the route on the ancient map, tracing invisible paths through shifting tides, watching the stars for guidance. And then, one morning, Moss bleated loudly. Catsi rushed to the deck. There, on the horizon, a shape. Not a ship, not a storm, but something greater. An island. But not just any island. It was huge, stretching beyond what the eye could see. Mist curled around its emerald hills, waterfalls tumbled from golden cliffs, and the trees, tall as towers, swayed gently in the wind. And more than that, it was alive. Great creatures roamed the shores and forests, some familiar, others pulled from the pages of forgotten fairy tales. Cat C's heart pounded. She had found it. The floating island. The beasts of the island. As her ship neared the shore, Cat C saw them, 5 wondrous creatures among the trees and waters. The glass stag, a great deer with crystal clear antlers, shimmering with captured sunlight. It moved like mist, almost translucent, and its hooves made no sound. Legends said that one who followed its path would always find their way home. The moon panther's midnight black felines, their fur glowing faintly like moonlight on water. They never cast shadows, and their golden eyes gleamed with strange wisdom. The whispering owls, massive white owls, perched in the tallest trees. But instead of hooting, they whispered, soft voices carrying on the wind, speaking in languages no human could fully understand. The winged serpents, slender dragons, coiling through the air like living ribbons of fire and wind. Their scales changed color with their moods, and their wings shimmered like a mirage. The stonebacks, great tortoises, their shells covered in moss and small trees. Some were so large that birds nested in their branches, mistaking them for islands themselves. Cat C and her animals stepped onto the shore, the sand warm beneath their feet. The air smelled of wildflowers and salt, of ancient things untouched by time. She took a breath. They had arrived. But then, a voice. The guardian spirit appears. The wind shifted. The trees rustled. And then, standing before them, was a figure unlike any Cat C had ever seen. He was tall, half man, half beast, his body covered in silver blue fur. His eyes were like the stormy sea, ancient and knowing. Great antlers rose from his head, twisted with vines and glowing runes. When he spoke, his voice was like the whisper of waves against a shore. "You have come far," he said. "But this island is not for you." Cat C swallowed hard. "We mean no harm. We only seek shelter." The spirit tilted his head. "This is a sacred place. A sanctuary. It is not meant for human hands to touch." She hesitated. "But, my companions? The animals? Surely, they belong here." The spirit looked at them, Kaiko, Coco, and Kari curling their tails, Nivis and Vetra coiling through the grass, moss munching on wild clover. He nodded. "They may stay. But you," his eyes locked onto hers. "You must prove yourself. The test of riddles. I will ask you 3 riddles," the spirit declared. "Answer them wisely, and I will let you stay. Fail, and you must leave." Cat C took a deep breath. "Ask them." The first riddle. "I am not alive, but I grow. I do not breathe, yet the wind makes me stronger. I do not have a mouth, but water kills me." Cat C thought. It sounded like something that was growing, but not alive. Something that thrived in the wind but perished in water. Then, she smiled. "Fire." The spirit nodded. "Correct." The second riddle. "I can be cracked, made, told, and played. What am I?" Cat C frowned. "Cracked. Made. Told. Played." She thought of the sea. The wind. The stories Joran Tidewake had told her on his strange fish ship. Then it clicked. A joke. The spirit's eyes gleamed. "Correct again." The third riddle. "The more of me you take, the more you leave behind." Cat C frowned. This one was trickier. "The more you take, the more you leave behind." She thought of food. Of water. Of treasure. None of it made sense. Then she saw Kaiko walking along the shore, tiny prints marking the wet sand. Footsteps. She blurted out. The spirit smiled. You are clever, little sailor. But that is not the answer I sought. Catsy's stomach sank. Had she failed? The spirit gazed at her, thoughtful. Then he exhaled, and the wind shifted once more. You have wisdom, he said. And a kind heart. That is enough. The sacred agreement. The spirit looked deep into Catsy's eyes. You may stay, he said. But there are rules. No cutting trees. No picking flowers without purpose. No hunting. There is food enough here, the spirit continued. Fruit in the trees, brushwood for your fire. If you ever need more, call my name, and I will provide. Catsy nodded solemnly. I promise. The spirit gave her one final, piercing look. Then he vanished into mist, his voice lingering like a fading echo. Welcome to the floating island. A new home. And so, Catsy and her animals settled into their new home. She built no house, only a shelter of driftwood and vines. She gathered no more than she needed. She listened to the whispering owls, watched the glass stags wander through the mists, and saw the stoneback tortoises carrying entire forests on their backs. And above all, she waited. Waited for the day when the rain would finally stop. Waited for the moment when the sea would once again reveal its sunken cities. But for now, she had found her place in the world. Part 4, The Battle Beneath the Waves. The arrival of the Sea People. Catsy had thought her journey was over. The floating island had become her home, a paradise of whispering owls, glowing panthers, and stoneback tortoises. Her animals roamed freely, her days were peaceful, and the rain no longer felt like a curse but a part of life. But fate had one final challenge for her. One evening, as she watched the silver waves lap against the shore, the water began to glow. A deep, blue light pulsed beneath the surface, growing brighter and brighter, until figures emerged from the depths. They were not human. They had the shapes of men and women, but their bodies shimmered like fish scales, their eyes glowed like pearls, and their long, flowing hair swayed as if still caught in the currents of the deep. The Sea People had come. The tallest among them, a woman clad in coral armor, stepped forward. You are the one, she said, her voice like a song carried on the tide. You are the only one who can end the flood. Catsy's heart pounded. How? The sea woman's expression grew grave. A great demon lies beneath the ocean. It is the source of this endless rain, this drowning of the world. It must be destroyed. Only then will the water recede. Catsy's breath caught. A demon. She had thought this flood was simply a strange, terrible storm. But a dark force, something alive, that was different. The sea woman continued. Only a warrior from the floating island can defeat it. Catsy frowned. But the guardian spirit never let people onto the island before me. The sea woman nodded. Exactly. You are the only one who fits the prophecy. You are the only one who can fight the demon and win. Catsy clenched her fists. She had come too far, survived too much, to turn back now. I'll do it. The Sea People bowed their heads in gratitude. Then, they began their preparations. The gifts of the sea. The Sea People did not send her to battle unprepared. They gave her 4 enchanted gifts, each one vital for the fight ahead. The ocean's embrace, a tight-fitting jumpsuit, woven from enchanted sea silk. It allowed her to breathe underwater, resist the crushing pressure of the deep, and remain warm no matter how cold the abyss. The blade of tides, a sword, its blade made of pure sapphire, glowing with an inner light. It was sharp enough to cut through even the toughest demon hide. The storm piercer crossbow, a crossbow with 10 enchanted arrows, each carrying the force of a tempest. Any creature struck by them would be shattered like a ship against the rocks. The pearl elixir, a shimmering potion. Drinking it would make her immune to illusions, protecting her from the demon's trickery. With these gifts, Catsie was ready. She bid farewell to her animals, promising them she would return. The guardian spirit watched her in silence, his stormy eyes unreadable. And then she dived into the sea. The abyss of the demon. The sea people led her deep, deep below the waves. The world grew darker. The light of the sun faded, replaced by eerie blue glows from the creatures of the deep. Strange, alien fish darted past, their scales flashing like stars in the blackness. And then they reached it. The abyss. It was a great trench, an open wound in the world, its depths darker than night. From within, a foul purple light pulsed, like the heartbeat of something ancient and monstrous. The water here was thick, heavy, tainted with some unholy power. And then it awoke. A rumbling shook the ocean, and out of the trench, it rose. The demon of the deep. Its body was a grotesque fusion of beast and shadow. Tentacles writhing like living nightmares. A mouth lined with endless rows of teeth, stretching too wide to be natural. Its many eyes burned with violet fire, each one staring, piercing, watching. Its voice was a whisper and a roar at the same time. "You are too late, little one." Catsie gritted her teeth, gripping the blade of tides. "We'll see about that." The battle begins. The demon lashed out, sending forth a swarm of shadowed horrors, twisted creatures of the deep, their glowing eyes filled with malice. Catsie raised her crossbow and fired. 1 arrow. 2. 3. Each bolt struck true, shattering the beasts into mist. More came. She fired again. 4. 5. 6. One by one, the creatures fell, until the final 7th, 8th, and 9th arrows ended the last of the demon's servants. She had only 1 arrow left. And then the illusions began. The demon's trickery. The ocean twisted around her. She was no longer in the trench. She was on the deck of her ship. The rain had stopped. The sun was shining. Her animals were waiting for her. "Come back," Catsie whispered the sea. "You don't need to fight." For a moment, she hesitated. It felt so real. But then she looked down. She was still wearing the ocean's embrace. Still holding the blade of tides. This wasn't real. She drank the pearl elixir. The illusion shattered. And the demon was before her. The final strike. It lunged, its enormous jaws opening wide. Catsie dove forward, sword flashing. The demon howled, tentacles lashing, eyes burning. And she plunged the blade of tides into its heart. A terrible scream ripped through the sea. The demon thrashed, its body cracking, its form collapsing into darkness. And then it was gone. The waters recede. The ocean trembled. The currents shifted. And above them, something changed. The flood was ending. Catsie swam upward, watching as the impossible happened. The water sank. Not just a little, but miles downward, returning to where it once had been. The peaks of buildings appeared, then rooftops, then towers, then whole cities. The world was restored. The people rejoiced. But Catsi did not return to them. She had found her home. The keeper of the floating island. She returned to the floating island, where the guardian spirit stood waiting for her. He nodded. You have done what no other could. Catsi smiled. I will stay. And so, she did. She lived among the whispering owls and the glowing panthers, among the glass stags and the stoneback tortoises. A girl who had sailed the endless flood, who had fought a demon beneath the sea, who had saved the world. Now the keeper of a sacred island. And legend says she still walks among the trees, her animals at her side, watching over the world she saved. The end.